All right, well, good morning. I'll go ahead and call our meeting to order. This is the August meeting of the Commission to Combat Substance Use Disorder. The meetings were distributed to the members prior to the meeting. Seeing that we have a quorum, may I have a motion to approve the minutes? Moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. The minutes from the May meeting have been approved. Before I introduce our first speaker, I want to take a few moments to share a few updates. At the end of June, 900 addiction and mental health professionals gathered in Indianapolis for the inaugural Indiana Mental Health and Addiction Conference. This was hosted by the Division of Mental Health and Addiction, Next Level Recovery, and the Indiana Recovery Network. And the conference combined several meetings that the state and our partners have hosted in the past, like in ARMS and the Peer Recovery Conference. And the whole goal was to better integrate those who are working in the mental health and the addiction fields. So our goal is to have this conference every 2 years, and we're already having conversations about the 2025 event and how we can grow it and make it even larger. Also in June, we announced over $76 million in new funding to help build out and support projects across Indiana to improve mental health and recovery services for Hoosiers. This included $57 million in American Rescue Plan funds to advance the state's integrated crisis response system, and $19 million in state opioid settlement funds to support community-driven responses to the drug epidemic, which we'll expand on a little bit later. It's now my pleasure to introduce our recovery speaker, Aaron Davis. Aaron is celebrating 6.5 years in recovery and serves as a peer recovery coach at PACE here in Indianapolis. So welcome, Aaron. The floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. I cannot take credit for an extra year or 10 months. I have 5 years and 8 months in recovery. I don't want to jinx anything. I don't want to rock the boat. So again, my name is Aaron Davis. A little bit of the backstory that got me here to this moment. I was what my family referred to as an outgoing introvert. I was perfectly happy and content to be a kid left to myself and to explore and ask questions and to write songs and to, play instruments, all those things, which was very bizarre because both of my parents started out their professional lives as physical education majors. So they were like, where did this little thing come from? But I always just felt big feelings. And with all that imagination, I was also always very worried. I was worried about everything. I wanted to manage. My parents were just like, what did we ever do without you? Oh my gosh, chill out, But it was just the early signs of truly what would become severe panic disorder, severe anxiety. It was just one of those things that was just that low hum in the background of everything I did. I always was waiting for the other shoe to drop as early as I can remember, which is a strange thing looking back now as a parent to see my child and think about me at certain ages like that I was, already trying to fix, manage, and control all of the things around me. My family life was stable. My parents are still married. Other than the fact that we moved a lot. We got transferred all around. And the outgoing part is because if you want to make friends when you're the kid that's, paraded in the middle of a school day, you better learn to speak up and talk to people. Our last kind of substantial move was to Louisville, Kentucky, where I went to high school. I managed to stay there all 4 years, which was a blessing. I got good grades, I was in clubs, I had friends, I played sports, all those things on paper. Things were going really well. In some moment of rebellion, my friends and I decided to try to drink some alcohol one occasion during a Kentucky Derby Festival event. And like any good students, we planned to the hilt and, we got caught immediately. It was awful. And our parents were so dumbfounded. My mom didn't know what to say, and she ended the chat about it with, I hope you learned your lesson. And I just remember thinking, oh, I did. That was fantastic because it numbed that worry. It stopped those ruminations. It stopped those thoughts. And from then on, when I could, I did drink. I drank with a mission. I got better about hiding it. I was assaulted when I was in high school. That just really ratcheted up the anxiety to full panic. The anxiety depression loop just became like whack-a-mole. I wanted to say that of course I drank, I was depressed, I was scared, I was anxious, but then also I knew that I was anxious and scared and depressed because I was drinking and hiding it and lying, and that was not me. At one point, I went to college, and right after high school, I went to college. I picked badly, immediately wanted to leave by September, and this was a school I'd done early decision to. I was positive this was going to fix everything. It was the beginning of the geographical shuffle, as we say, in recovery. We figured that our problems and everything else will just stay put while we go off and, reinvent ourselves, and it turns out that is a pretty awful plan, because things just ramp up, only you have a fresh start. I was assaulted again when I moved after college. That just led to more depression, more just hopelessness. I have found later on that, a lack of hope and hopelessness altogether is fatal. That's all we need. That's all people need to hang on, just for that one moment where you can turn things around. My parents picked me up from the hospital after a car accident. That was my fault, and brought me here. I was in therapy, but it was therapy and then treatment and then therapy. I did not want to acknowledge that those two things went hand in hand for me, the mental health stuff and the substance stuff. I was arrested for an OWI here about a year after I moved here to calm down and get my life together. And while I was in the Marion County Jail, I found out I was pregnant. I wanted so badly for things to be different. I held it together and stayed substance-free, but just ultimately dry throughout my pregnancy. I then was able to drink when I wanted to while he was at his dad's. Things just got worse. They ramped up. I went to more treatment. But 4 years, 355 days after the first OWI, I got a second OWI, and that 10 days later would have been a misdemeanor, but in my case it was a felony, and I needed it to be exactly that. I got into treatment. I violated my probation. I told my probation officer, because I'm a bad liar when I'm face-to-face with somebody. I did not like it. I blurted it out, and I was sent to prison for 3 months. I got out of prison, and here was this kid who had never had a detention, and now I'm a felon. And it was about a year after that of sulking and feeling sad and desperate and just hopeless. And I got out my Medicaid card, because I don't know, somebody in me had me make a call and make sure that was in place. And the woman that answered the phone was this care coordinator, and her name was Barb Z, and she listened to me sob for what felt like hours. I wasn't on probation anymore. It was nothing like that. There was no ultimatum. There was the general tenor in my family and amongst my friends was some shade of annoyed and, aggravated with me and all of my mess. But people loved me even when they didn't like me. They just hung on with me. But there was no threat of anything, and I just called, and this woman listened to me, and I went back to IOP, and I was terrified to leave. I loved it. I loved being there. I knew this was it. And she kept extending my sessions. I was like, I'm not ready to go, and she would have a couple more covered, and then finally, between the fabulous nurse Barb Z and my group counselor, they had to kick me out of the nest. I got certified that was December 6th of 2017. I got certified as a peer recovery coach. For once, I felt like I had a calling in a direction. I had never felt that. I'd never been more sure of anything in my whole life, was that I needed to give back in my own recovery, but also I couldn't imagine doing anything else professionally aside from helping, my people. I have found that with peers, there's a unique sense of credibility, where you want to trust the person in the white coat that is telling you it's okay, we're not judging you, but unless you know that somebody has been there, because your logical mind knows all these things you're doing is wrong, but on the other side, it is not a party. We don't realize at first that we can't selectively numb, and when we're killing the pain, we're dampening out all of the joy too. But I got certified in 2019. I had to be positive that I wasn't going to go down with somebody else's ship and hear a sad story or feel like I was at a dead end with somebody and jump in. So I was not going to tank my own recovery first and foremost for my son, myself, my family, but I didn't want to ruin somebody else's life. So I waited until October of 2022, so just this past year. I saw this job opening at PACE. We do reentry services for people, some with recovery, some not, but everybody with justice involvement. And I applied, and I slammed the laptop, and I just didn't want to think about it again, but things just came together, and I've been there since. And I love it so much, and I just hope I can be somebody's Barb Z one day. So thank you all so much.
Well, thank you, Erin, for sharing your story. And Erin also attended the Mental Health and Addiction Conference back in June. And it was during the breakout session that she was talking to our managed care entities, shared her story, and really the success of our MCEs and their care navigators. So Erin is a true testament that recovery is possible, and with the help of our care navigators like Barb Z, there's hope. So thanks again, Erin. Last December, the State Budget Committee approved our $52 million plan to utilize the 35% share of the state's half of the 2022 and 2023 payments from the National Opioid Settlement that has been appropriated to the Family and Social Services Administration. So as part of that plan, which is available on our website at in.gov/recovery/settlement, we committed $25 million to a matching grant opportunity. And in May, I shared that we had received 78 applications totaling over $93 million in requests, and in June we announced those 30 recipients. So I've asked Kelly Welker, who is the Director of Addiction and Prevention Services at FSSA's Division of Mental Health and Addiction, to share more about those awards and the new grant opportunities that are forthcoming. Kelly?
Thank you, Chairman Hunsinger and Commission members, for having me here today. As Chairman Hunsinger said, I'm here today to talk about some of our initiatives that we're using for our opioid settlement funds. And so the first one I'm going to discuss is our match program that Chairman Hunsinger just referenced. We released our application on January 31st of 2023 and had all responses come in due by February 28th of 2023. In total, we received 78 proposals requesting $93 million. This was for local units of government were required to provide match settlement funds for this initiative. At this time, I also want to thank the team that worked on reviewing all 78 proposals. It was a month-long process. Each and every proposal was scored, reviewed, and discussed in thorough detail with our team at that. Part of the opioid match settlement program, our goal was to help communities and counties really collaborate and build connections to increase their infrastructure and implement evidence-based programming. This one-time funding was used to support evidence-based prevention, treatment, recovery, and harm reduction services, and expand the behavioral health workforce and implement other services and initiatives across the state. As part of our awards, we were able to award 30 local units of government, service providers, and community organizations for a total of $19 million. This is reaching users in 28 different counties. Some of our initiatives that include access to treatment for co-occurring disorders to uninsured mothers and first responders, reliable transportation to places of employment, treatment, court, and other services, and then provide substance use education to adolescents, prescribers, service providers, and stakeholders to promote prevention and harm reduction. I would like to say at that time, we noticed a lot of our initiatives and proposals, there was for peers and also recovery residents. So at that time, we decided to pull out those so we could, there was such a large disparity in the amount of funds requested for these, and so we're going to be able to the ability to standardize the process for that, and I'll discuss more of that coming up. The next program I want to discuss initiative is our capital expenses for recovery residents. One of the benefits with the opioid settlement funds, typically any sort of funding, you are not allowed for capital expenditures. The opioid settlement funds allow us that opportunity, so we're taking that advantage and released a RFF for capital expenses. We released that opportunity on June 30th of 2023, and that is currently out on the streets, and all responses were due July 31st of 2023. In total, we received 43 proposals requesting over $25 million. We are currently in the process of reviewing all those proposals, and the award determination will be August 31st of 2023. So the funding timeline for this is October 1st of 2023 to September 30th of 2024, so it's a one-year award. Requests were limited to $750,000 and no more than $34,000 per bed. And the purpose of this initiative was to increase bed capacity, so that is one of the requirements for this award. Matching funds were not required, but were encouraged, and allowable costs included purchase of property, construction, or renovation of a building. Lastly, the requirements for this is you must become a DMHA certified level 2, 3, or 4 recovery residence. You must accept all 3 forms of FDA-approved medication for opioid use disorder, and all awardees will sign a binding agreement to operate the recovery residence for a minimum of at least 5 years. At this time, I'd also like to announce that our next initiatives we'll be looking at too are our peer services that we discussed, as well as harm reduction that will be released later this year. Thank you.
Questions for Kelly? Devin? Sorry. Thank you.
Real quick, this is probably some of my ignorance with this. So as we're expanding beds, which is fantastic, do we run into, and we've talked repeatedly about workforce shortages, but with the expanded beds, what does that do to exacerbate that issue? Are we infringing on, like, is there a number of ratios of how many staff can serve how many people or anything like that?
So there are requirements for recovery residents, so a certain amount of square footage per person, a certain amount of beds and restroom facilities for that. The one good thing, we did just release, I believe is currently being awarded, workforce grants. So hopefully we are doing everything that we can to increase our workforce as well. But there are requirements that they must follow for that.
Okay, and I'm assuming you'll probably align those workforce grants with the ones that applied for the bed expansion.
It's to increase the workforce for behavioral health as a whole.
Oh, okay, all right,
Yes.
cool, thank you.
And Devin, just so in the matching grants, there were a number of like certified, licensed clinicians. Most of those positions were pulled out of those proposals because in rural areas, you're just transferring one person from one company to another or one project to another. And we realized we'd just exacerbate the shortage that we already have. So we didn't fund a lot of positions in that. And recovery residences are usually peers are who's staffing those. So and luckily in Indiana, we do have a plethora of peer recovery coaches. But it's that how do we move our peer recovery coaches into those certified roles, those licensed roles? And that's what the Public Health Commission, the Behavioral Health Commission are working to align. And then we've also held out $10 million to implement those recommendations when they come down.
Okay, good, yeah, I'd hate to be in a scenario where we have, 100 empty beds, but can't put anybody in them because we don't have workforce to cover them. So, thank you.
Denise?
Thank you. I'm curious, you mentioned in your presentation that there were, and hopefully I followed this right, you mentioned 78 proposals have been submitted, and then I believe 28 counties received awards. Am I connecting those right?
It was, we did 30 awards, but 28 unique counties.
Thank you. So that's what I was going to ask, is how many of the 28 that were awarded, or 30 that were awarded, collaborated with other counties, is what I'm curious about.
We did encourage regional approaches to that, and I believe we had 1 or 2 that looked at more of a county level instead of just a small local unit of government.
Got ya. So, but no examples of counties coming together in these awards?
No.
Okay, thank you.
We tried really hard, though.
We did.
I can appreciate that. In public defense, we long for regionalization as well, and it's available, but only a few counties have availed themselves of it. But thank you.
Senator Yoder?
Thank you so much for your presentation. You probably said this, and I just didn't hear how much. So you received 43 proposals for the capital expenses for recovery residences, and all of those total 25 million. How much of that are you going to be able to fund?
We are currently in the process of reviewing the proposals, so we won't have the
Yeah.
award until August 31st of this year.
Is there a scenario, if they were all good, you would have 25 million? I'm just wondering, what is the amount that you can be
If every single
spending?
proposal met every single requirement, yes, we would be able to. But one of the main requirements is that they must accept all 3 forms of medication for opioid use disorder, and that's something that we're still working on with a lot of our recovery residences.
Well, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you very much.
So staying on topic, I'm going to invite Corey Voigt from the Attorney General's office to provide an update on the status.
They will be sent to the state typically July, end of July, is depending on the administration of the funds to the state. The recent news in the opioid litigation sphere is there were settlements with 3 big retail national chain pharmacies, CVS, Walmart, and Walgreens. And the money that's going to come in will come in a similar manner as I just described for distributors and Janssen. CVS, $105 million will come to the state over the course of 10 years. Walmart, $60 million. Walmart is paying up front. They're going to pay in 1 year. Walgreens, $114 million to the state over 15 years. Also, as a part of recent settlements, there were 2 manufacturers that have settled with the states and the localities. These are national settlements. Teva, which was a generic manufacturer of opioids, and Allergan, which is also a generic manufacturer of opioids. Teva will be sending $80 million to the state of Indiana over 13 years. Allergan will be sending $48 million to the state of Indiana over 7 years. Finally, I'll close out on settlements. These are not settlements, but the bankruptcies of certain companies. Purdue Pharma, unfortunately, that is a matter that continues, but we are hopeful that now that it is a matter that went up to the Second Circuit, and we're hoping that it will come back down to the bankruptcy court and there will be a plan of reorganization that will be entered soon. There is probably some discussion about the Second Circuit case being appealed to the Supreme Court. We'll have to see what happens there. But Purdue Pharma is outstanding. Mallinckrodt is the other bankruptcy. And Mallinckrodt, they did get a plan of reorganization in the bankruptcy court. That plan is in place. As a part of that plan, Indiana is supposed to receive $3.4 million. Mallinckrodt's been in the news lately about potentially thinking of going into bankruptcy again, unfortunately. That may affect the opioid settlement money from Mallinckrodt. We'll have to see what happens there. There is a spreadsheet of payments on my office's website, the Office of the Indiana Attorney General, and then the Commission's website also links to that spreadsheet. That spreadsheet is exhaustive. So it lists all 658 localities in the state, all counties, cities, towns, and it lists each amount of it lists the dollars that will be coming to those communities by year. It also breaks out the payments by the settling party and the amounts that settling party is paying. So I'd encourage everybody to go take a look at that. Also on our website, and then also linked to the commissions, is the approved uses for this money, and it's about a 14-page document. It's exhaustive too. It lists anything that you could think of that hopefully can can be put out there to do good work. And if any of the localities have any questions about that, please consult that document. I will say that the money that's going to the localities, as I said, it's half of the dollars coming in. 35% of that money needs to be attributed to abating opioids. So one of those uses that under the document I just described, one of the many uses for education, preventment, or treatment, and 15% of those funds are unrestricted. What I've heard is most communities are just going to use the money for abatement, but there are unrestricted dollars that will come in too. Kind of getting down in the weeds a little bit about this, if the locality is of a certain population, it's restricted dollars to the extent it does not receive $5,000 in any given year of restricted money, that will roll up to the county. The locality still receives the unrestricted dollars. Final thing I'm going to talk about is reporting requirements, and just fairly briefly. The Indiana Code, as passed by the General Assembly in the last couple of years to deal with distribution of dollars in the state, requires that the localities monitor the use of funds that come to them and that are spent in their communities, and that how they're spent is reported ultimately to the FSSA. And Director Hunsinger is going to talk about that in a second. Then on our level, at the state level, we have to report by settlement what was done with the unrestricted money. And so we are working through that. Money's already started to come in, but this process is still being worked out as how do we report up to the national administrator, working out the form, working out how that report is made, working out how the localities identify what money came in from what settlement and how it's spent, and then how it's reported back up. I say all of that because in some sense, for some of our smaller communities, it might get messy in how to report this and reporting back up. And so I would leave everybody with just that over the next year or two, as we go through this process of reporting, we're looking for progress, not perfection, of course. And the attorneys will be involved, and it's not going to interrupt the flow of dollars, but we'll talk and figure out how the reporting requirement is done. With all of that, I will go ahead and turn over to Director Hunsinger. Thank you.
Any questions? Bernice.
Thank you. Is now an okay time to ask questions about the reporting document you sent out?
Let me give a brief intro to that, and then we can get right into questions on that if you have them. So, as Corey mentioned, FSSA is responsible for collecting the reporting from the local units of government, and in an effort to collect reports from all 648 units, we've worked with FSSA, the Attorney General's Office, AIM, and AIC to create a set of data points that best collects the relevant information for all the entities that may have reporting purposes. And we also used reporting requirements that other states have developed in sort of looking at what we would ask for as well. So in your packet are the fields that we plan to ask for. The goal is to make this process as streamlined and as easy as possible for communities, understanding that some of our communities are receiving very few dollars, others are receiving significant dollars, and want to make sure that the process for actual reporting through the website is easy for all of those. In addition to making the reporting available to the legislature, it is our intent to make this information available to the public as well. So happy to open it up for questions. Bernice?
Thank you. So these are questions that probably won't contribute to easy, but I think all the fields look really, really good. When I looked at attachment E, that gave
Yes.
like a breakdown of how the funds could be used. My first question is, and this probably varies depending on where the funds are coming from, but are these reports being built from the idea that they'll be reported for 18 years? Okay, yes, okay. Then when I look at under designated fund box, it appears twice I printed it out, so on the back side. So under designated funds, it says, identify the qualifying strategy in which the funds were expended. And so my thought is there that it would be really helpful. Let me tell you my larger thought, and then hopefully that'll contextualize my question. This is such a great opportunity, since all of these practices that are available are evidence-based. Just because the money runs out in 18 years doesn't mean that the state of Indiana can't carry these ideas forward or these practices forward. But of course, we'd want to build evidence that they really did work on the ground. And so my question is geared at, it'd be so helpful in both where it says qualifying strategies, it says it down below. Well, the next designated funds, it also talks about, make sure that the funds were spent in accordance with the strategy. If we could identify, did the strategies work? And the reason why I asked about the 18 years is that could give a locality enough time to say, okay, in year one, there were prenatal services. So let's use that as an example. In year one, we assisted this many people with these prenatal services. Now, and how did they do? Or how were the babies that got, services? Just so we can say at the end of 18 years, this is where all of this money went. Here are all the practices, and here's how Indiana's better. Sorry I talked so long, but I just wanted to explain what I was.
No, you're right on track, and this is something that we've been having conversations on. So currently, a number of the projects that we fund are evaluated, fund from either DMHA or through settlement, through the match dollars. Some of them had evaluations sort of built into certain programs. Our goal, so in the plan that the Budget Committee approved, the settlement allows for a certain amount of money to be set aside for administration. And so we've brought on one individual at DMHA who's working to make sure that the contracts and the accounting, and they're going to bring on another to help work with all the contractors as well to make sure that the administration of the money is going well. But the other part of that funding will go toward evaluation. And we're talking about how are we looking at, how do we have someone that's looking at, did the money the state invested work? Possibly having someone that goes in and looks at how locals have spent their money, and did that work? And then, can those two then work together? Those two reports work together to tell us, did we have a cohesive strategy with these dollars together? So part of some of these requirements will have some text boxes where, when we say, what was the purpose of the dollars that you spent? My hope is we'll get a little bit more information that will then allow an evaluator to go into that community and dig in on some of those projects that will likely have a significant amount of impact. And some of them are actually pretty easy. I mean, when you look at increasing treatment access or increasing beds, we know as long as those beds are open that we're serving someone. So some of that will be easy. It's the ones where you're going to need to dig into more into the data, and that's a conversation that we continue to have, is how does that get put together? Chris?
Thanks, Doug. And just to piggyback on what Bernice was saying, I think when you first read the document, I wasn't sure whether this was from our legislature or whether it was required from the settlement, because it looks very compliance-oriented, which I'm all for compliance and accountability, that you're spending the money according to the settlement guidelines. But it is an opportunity, I think, over this period of time, and particularly in this space, and when we've tried to do this before in the state for just performance metrics as a whole for various programs, the most challenging areas are the ones that deal with the human condition, whether it's Department of Health or FSSA or DCS, just because it takes a long time to actually see the needle being moved. So I think to the extent that we can incorporate some outcome measures, even though they may not be apparent right away, it'd be helpful to do.
No, absolutely. Commissioner?
I noticed, so under the designated funds, there's a bullet point for time frame for expected expenditure. My assumption is that to make sure that they have plans for using that and they're moving it forward. Just not necessarily something that requires action, but I know in my experience sometimes that even though funds are encumbered, they don't always go anywhere. So may consider keeping an eye on those encumbered funds that aren't becoming expensed and try to get some information that way as well.
Yeah, I think in a lot of our smaller communities, so a bulk of the communities, I think this reporting will be fairly straightforward. When we get into the larger communities, and especially I would say the top 100, that encumbered number becomes much larger, and then it's, we need to start tracking carryover. It becomes much more difficult, and so we are continuing to, I guess I'll say, our hope is that this is the information that collects, that allows us to then dig in more, and we'll have some baseline. This is the baseline, but as we move forward, our hope is that we don't create a burden to the locals, but at the same time, we're able to track this from year one all the way through, and there's going to be some challenges, especially with not building this in an accounting system where they can kind of, where they're able to track it. There's going to be changes in the numbers from year to year that we'll have to dig in and understand what happened.
Sure.
It's actually a really good note. We probably need a category for, not for this year, but for next year, that would be funds that were encumbered but not spent, and where are those in the current spending plan? Any other questions? With that, I'll entertain a motion to accept the fields that we are planning to collect, understanding that there will likely be some minor modifications as we turn this list of fields into a web form that communities can report to.
So moved.
Second. All right, perfect. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you. So now we'll shift gears to the Indiana Criminal Justice Institute, Director Devin McDonald, to provide an update on his agency.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As many of you know, part of the requirements for the commission is that they kind of review and approve actions taken by the LCC and ultimately through the Criminal Justice Institute. So I will say I just have a couple quick points. One, we were hoping to have our annual report completed by now. Still doing some analysis on that and taking a look at a few things. Some other reports kind of slowed that down with legislative requirements and things like that. So looking to have that done here very soon to share at an upcoming meeting. I did share some results of last meetings, but I would like to reiterate some of those things that I mentioned in the last meeting and some of the results from the report and the surveys that we sent out. So one thing I would like to highlight is at the local level community collaboration, what entities are considered to be the most collaborative with the LCCs. It's probably no surprise. Law enforcement, education, and treatment centers are kind of the most collaborative groups with those, which I think is a really good thing, especially as many of the LCCs are involved in opioid settlement dollars going through the counties and things like that. So I think that's a highlight. You know, one thing I would like to say, another item I would like to highlight is that over half of the counties still perceive the drug issues in the state of Indiana as either moderate or severe. While we're making, I mean, as it's seen here and it's seen in Vermont, that we're making huge inroads, there's still a lot of work left that needs to be done. But I do, want to highlight that there is a lot of work being done. And so hopefully that trend shifts here in the future. As we talk about the survey and moving forward in the annual report, so we're based on the past 2 previous years, we're going to be making some changes to that report as we move forward. We've used kind of a mixed method approach, I apologize, on collecting that data previously. We're going to look more towards a qualitative approach to hopefully provide some more usable information as we move forward with that. Kind of last couple things, with the quarterly reports that we receive and the minutes and the technical assistance that we continue to provide, we had the network that we had funded quite some time ago, looking to continue that effort because it has proved fruitful, but has also seen necessary to continue that, as there's been so much change over at the local level with coordinators and work done at the local coordinating council level. As we all see that with our own staff. The more times you have turnover, the more times you have to kind of start over at square one. So we're going to be continuing those efforts and looking forward to continuing those efforts as we move into the next year and hopefully get some of that done in 2024. We do have some more Train the Trainer programs started to help train coordinators on some of those collaborative efforts moving forward through the LCCs and with our own staff. So really looking forward to see how that turns out. That's it.
Well, thank you. Any questions for Devin? All right. Before we adjourn, I'd like to invite the commission to be part of an announcement next month. As many of you have probably heard me tease our new addiction treatment locator. And just a reminder, when it launches, it'll be a free tool that will become the state's primary treatment finder, allowing Hoosiers to identify the appropriate type of treatment to meet their needs and to locate a high-quality facility anywhere in the state. Later this month, we're going to be training stakeholder groups who interact with members of the public who might be seeking treatment, including our 988 and 211 call centers, our peer recovery coaches and care navigators, and we'll unveil the resources, or the resource on the afternoon of September 29th at the White River Canal as part of the Indiana Recovery Network's Recovery Month celebration. So right here at the corner of Government Center North and the canal. And we'll send a formal invite as the date gets closer, but be sure to mark your calendars for that. I also, I forgot to thank our agencies who helped with all of the matching funds. The Department of Health sat on that evaluation team, and their expertise was invaluable, so thank you. But many of you and your agencies around the table also fielded questions, often with short turnaround times. Sometimes we were trying to hunt you down as we were meeting to get answers on best practices and what's going on in this community. So really appreciate everyone and their help in getting that done. I was just at the National Governors Association meeting, and I will say we're one of a handful of states that have started getting money out to communities. Many other states are still looking at what are evidence-based practices and how are they going to do this, and some states are still fighting over who gets how much share of the funds. So really proud of the work that's taking place here in Indiana and the collaboration that's going on. I think that the way that our settlement has been set up has allowed us to use our existing infrastructure that we've built, blend this funding with our current programming, and will ensure that this money will last for much longer than 18 years. So I want to thank all of you and thank the presenters for this morning. I appreciate everyone's time and attention. Our next meeting is November 2nd at 10 a.m. Right here in the State Library History Reference Room. We stand adjourned. Thank you.